H.Res. 755, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. In the House of Representatives, December 10, 2019, Mr. Nadler submitted the following resolution, which was referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Resolution, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. Resolved that Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following articles of impeachment be exhibited to the United States Senate. Articles of impeachment exhibited by the House of Representatives of the United States of America in the name of itself and of the people of the United States of America against Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, in maintenance and support of its impeachment against him for high crimes and misdemeanors.
I now recognize myself for purposes of offering an amendment in the nature of a substitute. The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.Res. 755, offered by Mr. Nadler of New York. Strike all that follows after the resolving clause and insert the following.
Without objection, the amendment shall be considered as read. Without objection, the amendment shall be considered as base text for further amendment. I will now recognize myself to explain the amendment in the nature of a substitute. This amendment makes a minor change in certain places where the underlying resolution refers to Donald J. Trump. The amendment refers to Donald John Trump. Otherwise, it makes no changes to the resolution. I urge all of my colleagues to support it. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, for any comments he may have on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment in the nature of a substitute is absolutely irrelevant. Taking Donald J. Trump and making it Donald Trump. John Trump just simply shows the, frankly, absurdity of where we're at. And today we're going to spend plenty of time.
No, it's simply a clarification of his name. Why is it such a big deal other than you want to waste a bunch of time?
No factual underpinning to impeach this president. But I'm going to go back for just a minute since I didn't have time and had to sit through a well-rehearsed, many days put together explanation on why.
It would have behooved you to rehearse a little bit.
The fact that this committee finally accomplished its goal after the chairman stated he wanted to since November of last year, impeach this president. What will be known by this committee from here on out is that this committee has now sounded the death of minority rights in this committee. This committee has become nothing but a rubber stamp. This committee is amazingly now on such a clock and calendar process that they don't care. Facts be damned. They don't care.
So why did they just clarify his name?
One witness out of three. When I asked for a second witness, I was told I couldn't, even though there have been staff conversations well before. I was told I was asking too late.
It's just a name change.
One witness out of two panels. That's all we had.
Name clarification. Simply a name clarification.
From day one. I could talk till I'm blue in the face, but nobody on the majority cares.
It's just a name clarification.
About what has just happened will resonate over the years.
Simply
It will
a
resonate over
name
the years in the sense that there is
clarification.
no fact that we can come to. They had no desire to hear any fact witnesses outside of their own train-driven clock calendar impeachment. For the chairman himself, who vehemently fought for minority hearing day, to sit there and read that is an amazing statement and a crushing blow to this committee.
Amazing and
There's
crushing
no way
that
to
they
recover from
clarified
that. In fact, there may be.
Donald Trump's
I wonder if the
name.
chairman would join me in making sure that
God,
the rules
could
committee
they
next
could
week,
they ever
don't
recover
waive
from
the
not
point of order against
from
this. But I know they will.
clarifying Donald
That's
Trump's
why they're
name?
gonna take it. Because I'll guarantee you, when you look into it further, this point of order would be sustained against these impeachment articles, so they're going to have to waive them next week.
It is ridiculous. It's just simply the difference between Donald J. Trump and Donald John Trump.
By the time it comes to the floor. For some of you may say, the ranking member talks about process. The ranking member talks about process. The ranking member talks about process, never the foundation. Believe me, we will inundate you with the facts, and I have already. Some of you just don't choose to report them. What
No,
is
you're
important,
just
and for many who
wasting
report on
time.
this body, and for many who have sat in this body, and for those who have served in this body, the members who have gone before, and the people who have set this committee up, and the people who have set our Congress up, are the ones right now that should be hanging their head in shame. We had 2 hearings, none of which featured fact witnesses. There's not a Democrat in this room that should be happy about this. The solemnity should be on the death of this committee's process and procedures. Don't give me the solemnity about impeaching a president. You've been wanting to do that for a long time. You ought to take it and just rejoice. Go at it.
Woohoo!
This is what you want.
Yes, sir.
But when it comes to the hearing, when it comes to the minority rights, When it comes to one that in which we have seen time after time after time, in which I have had to write this, Chairman, multi-page letters
It's
on the abuse of
just
procedural
a
issues in this
name
committee.
clarification.
This is a travesty. Write about it if you want, talk about it if you want, but the American people see it because the American people understand inherently fairness. They understand due process. Why? Because it's what America was based on. It is what America
It's important to
takes
clarify
pride in. And when we don't have
M.R.
it,
period
nobody
Collins,
can have
or
it.
should I say
We don't have
Mr.
fairness in this
Collins?
committee. How
Or
can
does
they
your
stand up and
name
say,
not
the two
mean
weakest
anything?
articles of
Does your
impeachment in the
name
history of
not
this
matter
country?
in the slightest?
Honestly, with a straight face, look at the American people and say, we did good.
That's all it is.
No,
He
you
just clarified
this body.
Donald John
You've
Trump's
taken this
name.
committee and made it a rubber stamp.
And that's
Did
exactly
any of the
what
majority run to be
the
a rubber
Republicans
stamp against the majority?
have
I know
been
the
trying to
minority on this side
do
did not. You know why
for
I know
the
it's
longest
why we're becoming a rubber
time.
stamp? Because my chairman said so 20 years ago.
Yeah.
He said so 20 years ago when he said, if the committee only accepts what other people give them and do not on their own verify it and thoroughly vet it, then we are
We've got a
nothing but rubber
democracy,
stamps. Mr.
not a
Chairman, you should have run for
dictatorship.
chairmanship,
You're
I believe,
blessed
more
to
than be
have
a
the
rubber
right
stamp
to
for
free
Mr. Schiff and Ms.
speech.
Pelosi.
And you're
Well, we knew
wasting
this
everybody's
committee was
time
overrun
just to
and
complain
overtaken
about
because Mr.
the
Schiff and
difference
Ms. Pelosi
between
took it
Donald
from us
J.
earlier
Trump
this year.
and Donald John
There's the
Trump.
first
It's
embarrassment.
just a
And the
freaking
rest of it
name
has been an
clarification.
embarrassment since.
Yeah,
So as we look
freaking
at this, as we go
embarrassment.
forward,
Why are you even standing
We'll
there?
have plenty of time to
Sitting
show the
there.
complete farce of substance. But Mr. Chairman, what will
It's
live from this
freaking
day is your
hilarious,
ruling
I
and
guess.
The majority's ruling of minority rights are dead in this Congress, and especially this committee. I yield back.
Move to
Gentleman
straight.
yields back. Are there
Mr.
any
Chairman.
amendments to the amendments?
Mr.
of the
Chairman.
nature- Are there any amendments to the amendment?
Chairman, move to strike last word.
For what purpose does Mr. Deutsch recognize?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I cannot allow the ranking member to mischaracterize your description of the history of this committee. It may be inconvenient for the ranking member to be forced to listen to the history of this committee and why everything that you just laid out is so important to the continuing of this committee representing and recognizing and respecting minority rights. But he chooses not to, so I'm going to restate it again. I appreciate the ranking member for acknowledging that they had the opportunity to call witnesses.
Like, you barely
consistent with the
started
rules.
for the day.
But to then turn around and suggest that the rules are being trampled, the rules are dead, ignores everything that you just laid out. More than 50 years ago, the Joint Committee on the Organization of Congress made clear in their report to the House and Senate that it's normal procedure for witnesses representing both sides of the issue to give testimony at committee hearings. And that's where the rule comes from. And that's what's happened. The ranking member acknowledged.
What's happening is y'all are both
Even if, like,
so
more
worked up,
witnesses,
Democrats
there's no
versus
right to a
Republicans.
separate day.
You can't
The
even
rule makes clear
let
they
the
have the right to call
procedure
witnesses. And there
proceed.
were witnesses called.
I mean,
There were
they've
witnesses
barely
called.
just
Minority
clarified
witnesses on
Donald J.
December
Trump's
4th.
name, and y'all
On
are
December
both
9th, the minority's witness, Mr. Castor, presented
all
evidence
over
in the
your
opening
dramatic
statement. And it's worth pointing out to my
perspectives.
colleagues on the other side that we invited the President of the United States to the December 4th hearing to advocate for his views, to submit requested witnesses.
Of course,
He
that's
chose
a
not to attend.
interesting statement and
chose
valid,
not to
but,
suggest
you know,
any
wouldn't it be
witnesses.
nice to just
So
proceed?
before telling us the sky is falling and there's great disrespect for the rules, it's important. to
It
actually
doesn't
look at
help
the
you to
gentleman
be
just said,
as
"I didn't
dramatic
request
as the
witnesses."
Republicans,
That is
just the
wrong.
Republicans are wasting time and being
I thank the
dramatic.
chairman. What I said is that the president was given the opportunity on December 4th to present himself. He was also given the opportunity to present witnesses, and he did not. So let's be careful in the way we suggest that rules are being violated when everything that's being done here is consistent with more than 50 years of interpretation of the rules and the very essence of why the rule was put together in the first place. So it's important. Facts really do matter. And we're not going to allow the minority to misinterpret the rules for their own benefit or to suggest that the history is irrelevant. It matters a lot. That's what's made this committee and this institution great, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute?
Mr. Chairman, I got
For what purpose does Mr. Jordan seek recognition?
have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
I reserve a point of order.
Gentlelady reserves a point of order.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.Res. 755, offered by Mr. Jordan of Ohio. Page 1, beginning on line 12, strike Article 1, and redesignate the succeeding article accordingly.
The gentleman is recognized for the purpose of explaining his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment strikes Article
I
1
withdraw
as,
my point of order.
this amendment strikes Article 1 because Article 1 ignores the truth. 4 facts, 5 meetings. We've talked about it now for 3 months. We've known that there have been 4 facts that have not changed, will never change, and we've known it since September 25th when the call transcript was released. The call transcript shows no quid pro quo. What's interesting is the day the transcript came out, even Chairman Nadler said there was no quid pro quo in the call transcript. We know, second, that the 2 individuals on the call, President Zelensky, President Trump, have both said no pressure, no pushing, no linkage whatsoever between security assistance money and any type of announcement of an investigation. We know that the Ukrainians knew at the time of the call, didn't know at the time of the call, that the aid had been held up, and most importantly, we know the Ukrainians took no action, no start of an investigation, no promise to start an investigation, no announcement on CNN, via tweet, no announcement whatsoever that there was going to be any type of investigation into Burisma or the Bidens to get the aid released. Those 4 facts have never changed. Second, 5 key meetings that took place between July 18th when the aid was paused, September 11th when the aid was released. 5 key meetings. We have the phone call. July 25th, which we just described. Second, the very next day, we have Ambassadors Volker, Sondland, Taylor meeting with President Zelensky. Third, Ambassador Bolton met with President Zelensky on August 29th. Fourth, Vice President Pence met with President Zelensky on September 2nd. And fifth, on September 5th, we have bipartisan Senator Johnson, Senator Murphy meeting with President Zelensky. In none of those 5 meetings, none, did linking dollars, security assistance dollars, to an investigation come up. Never came up. And you would think in those last 2, after they knew on August 29th via the Politico article that they knew the aid was held, you would think it would come up in those last 2 meetings, but it didn't come up. 4 facts, 5 meetings have never changed.
Because they knew.
Article 1 in this resolution ignores the truth, it ignores the facts, it ignores what happened and what has been laid out for the American people over the last 3 weeks.
Duh.
So I hope that this committee will come to its senses, that it'll adopt the amendment and strike Article 1 from the resolution. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, I
Chairman,
move to
back.
strike the
I now
last
recognize
word.
Mr. Cicilline in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word. Mr. Chairman, this amendment attempts to strike Article 1 in its entirety, so I want to go through the evidence that was actually developed during the course of this investigation, and particularly first begin with a focus on the President's own conduct. The President of the United States hired Rudy Giuliani, his personal lawyer, to go to Ukraine and lead this scheme to smear Vice President Biden. He then began a campaign personally to smear Ambassador Yovanovitch, and then ultimately directed that she be fired to clear the way of this anti-corruption champion so that his scheme could be fully implemented. He directed a hold on the military aid to Ukraine, and no one could provide any other explanation unrelated to his scheme to pressure them to interfere in the 2020 election. Then the president, in his own words, on July 25th, gets on the telephone and asks President Zelensky for a favor to begin an investigation of his chief political rival, former Vice President Joe Biden. There's a readout of the call-in evidence, which is a detail of this conversation. There's direct evidence from Alexander Vindman, Williams, Mr. Morrison, who listened in on and heard the president utter those words right out of his own mouth, pressuring a foreign leader to corrupt our elections. The president then made admissions in public on October 2nd, October 3rd, and October 4th. Then invited another foreign power, China, to interfere in the American presidential election. The chief of staff acknowledged that the president directed him to put this unexplained hold on aid to Ukraine. The president directed the vice president not to attend the inauguration of President Zelensky because he hadn't yet got what he was demanding, a public announcement intended to damage his political opponent. Ambassador Sondland testified that the Ukrainians were told, and I quote, the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that we had been discussing for many weeks. And then he testified he spoke with President Trump, and while the president claimed there was no quid pro quo, he made it clear that President Zelensky must publicly announce the two investigations that President Trump discussed on July 25th in the call in order for this security assistance to be lifted. That's direct evidence. But in addition to that, and those are just some of the highlights, there are over 260 text messages. There are call transcripts, as I mentioned, of the president's own words. There are emails between high-ranking officials of the Trump administration, hundreds of press statements, interviews, and tweets by the president and his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, corroborating their desire to pursue investigations of Vice President Biden prior to the 2020 elections. I'm going to give the committee a couple of just examples. President Trump himself on October 2nd said, and I quote, "And just so you know, we've been investigating on a personal basis through Rudy and other lawyers corruption in the 2016 election." On July 19th, Ambassador Sondland's emails multiple high-ranking officials that he, quote, talked to Zelensky, and he, quote, is prepared to receive POTUS's call and will state that he will turn over every stone of the investigations. And on July 19th, 2019, in addition to the email, Ambassador Sondland texts Ambassador Volker, makes the same thing clear. Sondland, looks like POTUS call tomorrow. I spoke directly to Z and gave him full briefing. He's got it. Volker, had breakfast with Rudy this morning, teeing up a call with Yermak Monday. Must have helped. Most important is for Zelensky to say that he will help investigate and address any specific personnel issues if there are any. On August 8th, Ambassador Sondland and Ambassador Volker text about POTUS wanting the deliverable, meaning that for Ukraine to get the White House meeting, Zelensky needs to announce the investigation. Sondland says, and I quote, "Morrison is ready to get dates as soon as Yermak confirms." Volker responds, "Excellent. How did you sway him?" Sondland responds, "Not sure I did. I think POTUS really wants the deliverable." Volker asks, "But does he know that?" Sondland says, "Yup. Clearly lots of conversations going on." On August 16th, Ambassador Taylor and Volker discuss Ukraine's concern that President Trump was not using official channels, like the Department of Justice, to repress investigations. Taylor texts Ambassador Volker, "The person who asked for an official request was Yermak?" Volker replies, "Yes, but don't cite him." Taylor, "I won't. You're right. This is not good. We need to stay clear." And on August 22nd, Ambassador Sondland emailed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and others to make clear that to break the logjam, meaning releasing the military aid, President Zelensky would have to, quote, move forward on the issues of importance to Trump, again, meaning the investigations. And the list goes on and on. So this